The Light Princess by George MacDonald. Part 6. She Laughs Too Much. Meantime, notwithstanding awkward occurrences and griefs that she brought upon her parents, the little princess laughed and grew. Not fat, but plump and tall, she reached the age of 17 without having fallen into any worse scrape than a chimney, by rescuing her from which a little bird-nesting urchin got fame and a blackface. Nor, thoughtless as she was, had she committed anything worse than laughter at everybody and everything that came in her way. When she was told, for the sake of experiment, that General Clanranfort was cut to pieces with all his troops, she laughed. When she heard that the enemy was on his way to besiege her papa's capital, she laughed hugely. But when she was told that the city would certainly be abandoned to the mercy of the enemy's soldiers, why then she laughed immoderately. She never could be brought to see the serious side of anything. When her mother cried, she said, "What queer faces Mamma makes! And she squeezes water out of her cheeks. Funny Mamma!" And when her papa stormed at her, she laughed and danced round and round him, clapping her hands and crying, "Do it again, Papa! Do it again! It's such fun! Dear, funny Papa!" And if he tried to catch her, she glided from him in an instant, not in the least afraid of him, but thinking it part of a game not to be caught. With one push of her foot, she would be floating in the air above his head, or she would go dancing backward and forward and sideways like a great butterfly. It happened several times when her father and mother were holding a consultation about her in private that they were interrupted by vainly repressed outbursts of laughter over their heads, and looking up with indignation saw her floating at full length in the air above them, whence she regarded them with the most comical appreciation of the position. One day an awkward accident happened. The princess had come out upon the lawn with one of her attendants, who she held by her hand. Spying her father at the other side of the lawn, she snatched her hand from the maid's and sped across to him. Now, when she wanted to run alone, her custom was to catch up a stone in each hand, so that she might come down again after a bound. Whatever she wore as part of her attire had no effect in this way. Even gold, when it was thus become, as it were, part of herself, lost all its weight for the time. But whatever she held only in her hands retained its downward tendency. On this occasion, she could see nothing to catch up but a huge toad that was walking across the lawn as if it had 100 years to do it in. Not knowing what disgust meant, for this was one of her peculiarities, she snatched up the toad and bounded away. She had almost reached her father, and he was holding out his arms to receive her and take from her lips the kiss which hovered on them like a butterfly on a rosebud, when a puff of wind blew her aside into the arms of a young page, who had just been receiving a message from his Majesty. Now it was no great peculiarity in the princess that once she was set a-going, it always cost her time and trouble to check herself. On this occasion there was no time. She must kiss, and she kissed the page. She did not mind it much, for she had no shyness in her composition, and she knew, besides, that she could not help it. So she only laughed like a musical box. The poor page fared the worst, for the princess, trying to correct the unfortunate tendency of the kiss, put out her hand to keep her off the page, so that along with the kiss he received on the other cheek a slap with the huge black toad, which she poked right into his eye. He tried to laugh too, but the attempt resulted in an odd contortion of countenance, as showed that there was no danger of his plumbing himself on the kiss. As for the king, his dignity was greatly hurt, and he did not speak to the page for a whole month. I may here remark that it was very amusing to see her run, if her mode of progression could properly be called running. For first she would make a bound, then, having alighted, she would run a few steps and make another bound. Sometimes she would fancy she had reached the ground before she actually had, and her feet would go backwards and forwards, running up upon nothing at all, like those of a chicken on its back. Then she would laugh like the very spirit of fun, only in her laugh there was something missing. What it was I find myself unable to describe. I think it was a certain tone, depending upon the possibility of sorrow. Morbidezza, perhaps. She never smiled.